Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This is part 2, the final part of my review of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men Annual number 6, cover dated 1982. This is a sequel to Uncanny X-Men 159, in which Storm was bitten by Dracula, and Dracula in this story has summoned Storm to England, specifically Cornwall, and he has a job for Storm, which is to steal a particular book, the Darkhold book, which contains a formula or an incantation that can kill Dracula for good. And it turns out that someone's gotten there before Storm, and that is Kitty Pryde. So that's a big shock. But something strange is going on with Kitty Pryde, and this is where part 1 of the review ended. So I'm going to continue now with the rest of King Size Annual number 6. So Kitty says in response to Storm, "This is a private quarrel, Ororo, stay clear of it." And Storm is pretty convinced, "You're not Kitty, but wear her shape, but you are not her." So if it's not Kitty, then who could it be? Kitty responds, phasing through a wall, which implies that, whoever it is has access to Kitty's powers. "After all, you ran right." "How do you know?" says Kitty. "After all, you ran right to Dracula's arms the moment he called without hesitation, or a real fight. You can't deny the attraction of evil. Perhaps I'm simply following your example." So then Storm is attacked by security guards who were present in the fortress in any case, and she still has that arrow in her back, so she's weak. She's falling from a high up story of the fortress, but who is she caught by except for Dracula himself in his bat form? And he says, "You'll not so easily cheat me of my prize, Ororo. If you cannot serve me further in life, then you shall do so in death." And of course, the implication is he's going to turn her again into a vampire to serve him in undead form. And now we're into chapter 3, so we're moving towards the end game of this particular annual. And it opens in, surprisingly, the central bazaar of Cairo, Egypt. At first, she does not believe where she is. She tells herself this is a dream, the fantasy of a delirious mind, and indeed the details are not all as she remembers them. Yet try as she might, she cannot deny the scene's reality or make it go away. And she sees there she's wearing a gown with a scarf, and they're Dracula's. So real as this seems, it must be an illusion. But is he the cause, or am I doing this to myself? And to what purpose? So then we get a replay of Storm's origin, well, part of her origin story, specifically the death of her parents. And even though she is in the scenario as an adult, everything happens just as it did in the past. There is a crashing jet which collapses a building on top of the family, just as Storm's father moves in order to cover her, which saves her life. Darkness and pain, eventually, of body and soul. Pain that will not be ignored as it forces Ororo awake, and she realizes that her mother is dead. And what happens is she will die here, she knows, alone in the dark, but then without warning, someone comes to rescue her, and it is Dracula. Again, what is wars with what was and what should be. And as Ororo once dragged her body from the shattered ruin of her home, so does she now haul her mind out of the dreams and nightmares that threatened to consume it. So she discovers that she was dreaming in a coffin that Dracula placed her in. And Dracula has a strange code of honor, much like Victor Von Doom. So he asks pardon of Storm. "When I chose your resting place, I forgot your fear of enclosed spaces," he says. This is an interesting panel where Ororo checks her teeth with her tongue and discovers she's got no fangs. So she thinks to herself, "I'm still alive, still human." And Dracula explains, "Your injuries have been tended to, you lost considerable blood, but fortunately I was able to put much of it to," and he pauses, "excellent use." So she knows what that means, that he has been drinking her blood. "Will I never be free of you?" she asks as she lunges at him. "No," he says as he smacks her away. And remember, Dracula has superhuman power. Storm is knocked into the coffin, upends it, and Rachel Van Helsing, who's been turned into a vampire, says to Storm, "You do not understand." He offers rapture and power beyond comprehension in terms of her seeming satisfaction with being a vampire. And Storm responds, "Yes, I see how happy he's made you, Rachel. He offers nothing I desire." And this is some brutal stuff here now. And also there is, an implication of sadism, where Dracula grabs her by the hair to expose her throat. The child Kitty has the Montesi formula, he says. "I must destroy her before she does me. To do that, I need every advantage, the strength of your mutant blood, plus the irresistible might of you by my side as a vampire." So Storm protests, and she's also concerned about Kitty, rather. And just as Dracula is about to bite her neck again, he is blasted by something or other, but the familiar sound effect indicates that it's Cyclops. So the X-Men have found where Storm is in Cornwall, but how did they make their way to England, and what put them on to Storm's absence? So we get a little explanation in a few moments' time, but first there's a fight, and this is a nice little sequence where Dracula grabs a spear from the wall and he sends it straight at Cyclops' chest. Cyclops calls out to Wolverine. No further explanation needed. Wolverine uses his unbreakable adamantium claws to parry the spear, which is caught by Nightcrawler, and then he plunges it into the heart of Dracula. Or maybe he misses the heart, because Dracula doesn't die immediately. And then his work done, he disappears again. Bamf. So Nightcrawler teleports away. This is good action sequence, reads very well on the page. So Dracula's struggling with the spear, and Rachel helps him. She pulls the spear from out of his chest and races towards Cyclops. And this is an interesting little move. Cyclops reacts instinctively, unexpectedly, with a judo throw that would have knocked her out had she been human. So she transforms into mist, and that is one of the powers that Dracula has, and obviously the vampires that he's created himself. And then she lands on Cyclops. This is a nice little image here where we just see her blonde hair and those fangs getting ready to bite Cyclops. But just at that moment, Kitty appears phasing through a wall with Colossus punching through the wall. "He will not escape us, Katya," says Colossus, "and no power on earth will keep us from him." So Kitty is racing towards Dracula. There's basically a huge melee going on. Dracula fires the coffin at her, but she phases through it, and Colossus basically totals that coffin with just one punch. Meanwhile, Cyclops is struggling with Rachel Van Helsing, who's transformed now into a wolf. And Cyclops thinks immediately, "Wrong move, lady. That makes you vulnerable to my optic blasts." So he zaps her with a controlled blast. Dracula decides it's time to make escape down to the Catacombs, far beneath this house, where I can eliminate the others one by one at my leisure. Kitty Pryde is the most dangerous, he thinks. She will be the first to feel my wrath. Okay, so it's all action now, more or less, to the end of the story. Kitty sees that Dracula's disappeared via secret passage, and she follows him by phasing through the wall. Wolverine grabs Colossus, asking him, "What's going on? Why'd you and Kitty swipe the Blackbird?" "Begone, Wolverine. Katya has summoned me," says Colossus as he smacks Wolverine. You can see the look on his face. He wasn't expecting that. "I must go to her," he says, "and if you try to stop me, X-Man, you will regret it." So something is up with Colossus. Cyclops calls out to him, "Wait, don't go in there. The passage might be booby-trapped." And then this is really interesting. There is a deadfall. So a huge block drops on Colossus, but of course he's got super strength, so he catches it on his back. Meanwhile, Cyclops blasts the slab with his optic beams, and when he's done, there is nobody there. So obviously Colossus survived. And now it's time for some explanations before the action ratchets up again. And Storm asks the question, that readers would have. Okay, how did you find me? So Cyclops explains, when Kitty swiped the Blackbird, she set off the alarms. The jet's automatic tracer beacon allowed us to follow it to England. On arrival, we heard about the break-in at Pendarrow Castle. That became our next stop. Wolverine's enhanced senses and tracking abilities did the rest. Okay, so we've got a fairly tight explanation, except for one thing. Since Kitty stole the Blackbird, so to speak, or borrowed it, or whatever phrase you want to use, how did they get to England? Is there two Blackbirds? What was their alternative mode of transportation? So there's no explanation of that. Storm says, Cyclops gives an order. Kurt, get Aurora to safety. Wolvie and I will. But then she interrupts. So despite everything, Storm is concerned with her position. I am team leader, Cyclops. She says, my place is here. Cyclops, demurs, contradicts her, says, don't be ridiculous. You're in no shape for a fight. Suppose Dracula regains control of you. But in a burst of light, Storm changes into her costume. I know the risk, she says, but if I'm to be true to myself as Aurora and Storm, I must stay. Win or lose, I must at least try. So Cyclops acquiesces, he agrees. See what I mean when I said in part one, the way that Bill Sienkiewicz is drawing Wolverine there, he looks very tall. He looks as tall as Cyclops. So something's gone a little bit wrong there with the proportion size of Wolverine. He's only supposed to be 5'3". So Storm continues. She says something else though. I believe Kitty and Peter are under another's influence. So readers are pretty much thinking the same by this point in the story. Cyclops agrees, sounds logical, the way they've been acting. And someone observes the nasty weather outside. That sounds like Wolverine. Nasty weather outside all of a sudden. You're doing, darling. And she says, in part, I fear so, Wolverine. A reflection of my mood. So that's something that, Claremont sometimes reminds us of, that Storm's powers, even though she has conscious control over them, when she's upset, when she's perturbed, when she's under stress or pressure, the environment around her, the elemental environment, can reflect her subconscious mood or her fears or emotional perturbance, and that's what's happening around the castle. So, Dracula's castle. So, Cyclops now bores a hole with his optic blasts down into the catacombs to make a bespoke entry to them. And we can see it here in this panel. I like the ink splatter there, conveying the rock or earth beneath the flagstones of that particular room down to the catacombs. And it gives us a sense of just how powerful Cyclops' optic beams are. So Storm gives them a lift down using her winds to cushion them as they drop to the ground of the catacombs. Wolverine's got the scent. That's a nice image of him there, hunched over, following the scent. And he thinks to himself, Roro's walking the edge, fighting not to show it. She's wired too tight. I wonder if she realizes how close she is to cracking. I wish I could help, but this scrap she has to handle solo. So Wolverine attuned to Aurora's disturbance, but also of a mind that it's something that she naturally has to handle herself. So now they discover Dracula in the midst of a fight with Colossus. Remember what I said, Dracula's got superhuman strength, so he's capable of holding his own against Colossus, and he flings him at the X-Men. So Wolverine dodges Colossus's body and says to Dracula, Bub, I've been aching for a rematch since our fracas in Central Park. So that's a reference to 159. So he lets rip with his adamantium claws, but Dracula is a formidable foe. And he says here, your claws, Wolverine, are formidable weapons. I think it far more fitting, however. So he punches Wolverine in the stomach, gets Wolverine... You see, this is interesting. This might be a Comics Code thing. So he punches him in the stomach, and then what has happened in between this panel and this one is he's bitten Wolverine in the neck and drawn blood. But for some reason, Sienkiewicz has chosen not to show that in an intermediary panel, and it just confuses things a little bit in the reading from this panel to this one. But as I said, it could be a comics code issue perhaps. And now that he's bitten Wolverine, Wolverine should be under his control. So he's putting Wolverine's claws into his service and directs him to kill Cyclops. Now, if you're a long-term reader of the X-Men, you'll know that Wolverine has a mutant healing factor, and that should it be capable of taking care of whatever virus it is that Dracula transmits in order to turn people into vampires or take control of them? Or is his power mystical in nature and Wolverine's healing factor wouldn't be capable of dealing with it? Let me know your thoughts on that one in the comment section to the video. So Wolverine lunges, jumps, leaps at Cyclops. Again, you can see he's too tall there in Sienkiewicz's drawing. And then the scene switches to Rachel Van Helsing going up against Storm down in the catacombs. Storm grabs a spear off the wall and she pins it right beside Rachel's head. My punch caught her off guard. She's vulnerable. I'll never have so good a chance again and must strike. So she does with the spear, but she doesn't kill Rachel. And Rachel is upset. She exclaims, "No, must I spend eternity enslaved to the monster I've sworn all my life to destroy? The battle has split his concentration, weakened his hold on me. My mind and spirit are at last my own. While there's time, Aurora, strike. Kill me." But you see the look on Storm's face. I thought I could, Rachel. I was mistaken, because at this point, Storm is not a killer. Now, there is a question as to whether this story has taken place after the Brood saga, when she did kill that embryo of the queen, the Brood queen inside her. Is it happening after that or before that? It could be either way, and there is a debate about that I mentioned in part 1 of my video review of the annual. Elsewhere, we're back to Wolverine taking on Colossus now. That's a pretty cool image. And also, let's see what's Dracula saying here. He's saying, "My mark is on his neck. Wolverine will not stop until I command it, and that will not be until you or he are dead," he says to Colossus. And Kitty phases in behind Dracula. "A brilliant ploy, sire. I used the same on Colossus last night to make him mine." So why does she keep calling him sire? Well, that's going to be revealed. In your case, unfortunately, it will prove too little too late. And then she begins an incantation, a dark incantation, the Montesi formula from the Darkhold grimoire, Hob Erasma, and Dracula hears immediately the incantation, the chant, the Montesi formula, Rebus, Catarama, and he begins to discorporate, Lucum Dei Paradoxus. So that is Latin actually, and that means the light of the paradoxical God. Kitty, in the name of God, says Nightcrawler. He teleports immediately behind her and knocks the enchanted book from her hand. "Be silent," he says. And she punches him in the face. "I wasn't finished. Misshapen freak. You've broken the spell. Have you any idea of what you've done?" And he explains, he says, "Those words from the Darkhold, ancient grimoire, utterly, irredeemably evil. Had you completed enchantment, your soul would have been forfeit." So, but she's got her hand gripped around his throat, and she's choking, crushing his windpipe, and Storm intervenes and pulls Kitty's hand away from his throat. And whatever you are, release your hold on this child, she says as well. So now we're going to get a revelation as regards what happened in Kitty's room the night before, which you'll see in part 1 of this review. So Dracula twigs, the girl possessed? Of course. That explains everything. A masterful stratagem I never suspected. Show yourself, daughter. Your masquerade is over. You've lost the ability to do me harm. So who has possessed Kitty? It is Dracula's daughter, Lilith. And she says, she commands the X-Men to slay Dracula. I command it, or I'll never release the girl. She'll remain the host form of a vampire forever. So this is the last twist in the story. So Dracula attacks his own daughter. He tells her, ever the courteous vampire, he says, mind your manners, daughter. You've lost, as you will always lose. As for you, X-Men, twice have our paths crossed. There will be no third encounter. Left alive, you would no doubt hunt me down, perhaps to my death. Therefore, you will perish, to be reborn, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood. But he is stabbed once again, speared once again, but this time it would appear through the heart. So he's down on the ground, and he's surprised because the one who threw the spear was Rachel Van Helsing, and he is taken aback. This cannot be, he says. You're mind, body, and soul. Once, she replies, but no longer. And she won't obey him. So now she makes a crucifix and basically using the object. And remember, this was established in issue 159, and it would have been also back in Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan's Tomb of Dracula. Religious objects only work if there is faith in the person using them. So she still has faith in the cross, and that's why it proves effective and melts the flesh off Dracula's bones. But she explains to Wolverine he can still be resurrected. For Dracula to undergo the true death, his head must be severed from his body. So Wolverine leaps to action. I'll handle that. Someone see to Rachel's hands. She's burned to the bone. So that's from holding the crucifix herself. But then we're wrapping up. Suddenly, a cave-in starts in Dracula's fortress. It's the gale, the waves hammering at the shore, says Storm. The entire cliff is collapsing. Let's roll, people, says Cyclops. We've only got seconds to get clear. Now, this is bizarre. This is a bizarre question of Wolverine's. What about Dracula? Not a hope, mister, unless you want to be buried with him. So, what's the deal there? Is the question there about bringing his bones out so that they're bathed in sunlight, ensuring that there is absolutely zero possibility of any kind of resurrection? In any case, the body or the remains of Dracula are left behind, and the whole castle slides into the sea. It's a close shave. So now it's nearly dawn. The night is over, just about. And Storm says to Rachel, it is nearly dawn, I know, she says. I have a favour to ask, my friends. Death by sunlight is slow and agonizing. A stake to the heart is quick. So Storm volunteers, but Wolverine pushes forward and says no. And this is a great line from him as he holds the stake in his hand. Killing's my profession. So it's interesting, he's holding the stake and also his claws are extruded as well, making the point about killing being his profession. And now we're on to the last couple of pages. So Wolverine stakes Rachel through the heart. He euthanizes her in effect. And then she gets to see the sun. Look, the sun, it's so bright, so beautiful, just before she discorporates. And no doubt he separates the skull from the rest of the skeleton as well. Take a walk, will you, Roro, guys, says Wolverine. I'll finish things. And as I said, that's probably about separating the skull from the rest of the skeleton. But I prefer to do it alone. So Storm says, I mourn her too, my friend. I should like to stay and help. But what about Lilith? How delightfully sentimental. If you miss her so much, X-Men, why not remove the stake? Perhaps she'll show her appreciation and make you all immortal with a kiss. So it's not Kitty. It is Dracula's deadliest, most implacable foe, his darling daughter, Lilith. So you can see, like, we're getting a very dense wrap-up on the final page here. Lots and lots of dialogue with explanations. So she explains, for any readers who've never come across her before, that she was created as a vampire to be her father's eternal nemesis. She says she could do anything but destroy him, yet to destroy him is her sole desire. She says, I learned of Montese's formula only to discover most painfully that Pendaro Hill was anathema to me too. I leaked word of my quest for the formula knowing Dracula would summon Storm to steal it. I possessed Kitty both to gain the ability to enter Pendaro Castle and to draw the X-Men into the fray. As Kitty, I approached Peter and took his blood, making him my devoted slave. I thought of fanging you all, but your wills are too strong. I could never maintain control over the entire group for long. The rest, as the saying goes, is history. So that's everything that happened in chapter 1, but now we get an explanation of it. But it is a little bit Silver Agey. It's like a Silver Age device that we have the villain, one of the villains anyway, explaining everything at the end of the issue. A little bit even Scooby-Doo, you know, with the reveal that Kitty was possessed by Lilith all along. And then she says, why? She says, your child is returned. Why though? X-Men, unharmed in mind or body, thanks to Nightcrawler's timely intervention. So, my work is done, we shall not meet again. But she could have maintained possession of Kitty Pryde, or is it because her father is dead, apparently dead, that and that's her sole desire, that now she's ready to head away? But she leaves with one other piece of information, and again, why does she give it? You know, the plot in some sense requires that she give it, and so she does. Oh Storm, she says, whispers to Storm, with Dracula's death, his hold on you and Wolverine is truly ended. You will not rise after death as a vampire. Pity, Colossus is in no danger either. He didn't lose enough blood. Farewell, X-Men, it's been fun. So that's the end of what was set up in 159, that Storm, you know, because of Dracula biting her, whenever she would die, she would come back as an undead vampire. So that's off the cards now. So Kitty comes to and she's all confused, and Storm tells her everything's all right now. Later, how's the kid? Asks Wolverine. Confused, tired, she remembers nothing since her tantrum the other day. And Wolverine says, good, that's it then, it's over. And this is a real, I don't know, cliche type ending, is it? And then the end, ... question mark. So, you know, I feel that this sequel to 159, I think that Claremont wanted to do it in order to undo the possibility of Storm coming back as a vampire when she died. He wanted to undo that. But also, you know, the chapter 3, after the business of Storm's memory of the death of her parents, it really is kind of plot driven. There's a lot less characterization, and a lot of the art, you can see it most particularly on this page. Sienkiewicz is just getting the pages done and getting to the end of the script. Whereas in chapter 1 especially, he's having great fun with the art. He's playing around with techniques and devices, and he's enjoying himself, and the art has more space to breathe. But by chapter 3, the third act, like I said, he's just trying to get the story told and get out on this final panel. So certainly not the best X-Men annual that Claremont produced. You know, good value for money at the time. You're getting 39 pages of story and art for a mere $1, so that's good value. But yeah, not one of the most memorable of the annuals. Certainly not at all in the ballpark of the Arthur Adams annuals that are coming in the future. Let me know your thoughts on this annual in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like this video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.